and God is at work. And today, what I want to share with you a little bit is about how God has worked in my life. I hope that it will be inspiring to you, be a blessing to you, be an encouragement to you as well. I want to start today by just showing you some pictures that are kind of going to help me introduce myself to you and share with you some things that I think you'll help find helpful and interesting. The first picture I want to show you this morning is a picture of me when I was just a little guy. I was born in the 70s, as you can tell by the long hair. 1971, August 28th. The numbers of my birthday, 8:28, remind me of my favorite verse, Romans 8:28, which says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose." Another thing you might notice is a tractor. I was born and raised on a little farm in southeast Kansas. We had about 1,000 hogs, a couple hundred cattle, a lot of tractors and big equipment. And I loved working out on the farm, still love being a part of that. Go on to the next picture, please. My parents and grandparents were all farmers. They were into sports. My dad especially, he was always wanting to play catch with the football, play catch with the baseball, even converted an old barn we had into a basketball court. So I loved playing sports. I'll go on to the next picture, please. Senior picture here, 1989, graduated from Chanute High School, little town of about 10,000 people there in the corner of southeast Kansas. Go on to the next one, please. I love to be out at the farm working. This is a picture. It looks like my head's cut off on part of that there. But I promise you it's there. Love to go out and pick up hay, and in the summer times, this is what me and a few of my friends would do, is go out and pick these bales up out of the fields and stack them in the barns for the farmers that lived in our area. Just kind of a great way for us to get a little exercise and make a little bit of money. Go on to the next picture, please. Love to water ski too. Told my grandpa when I was about 10 years old how much fun water skiing was. So we went out and bought a boat. Here I'm 19 years old, just enjoying life. You know, I was at that point in life where I was trying to make some plans, had some hopes and dreams. I wanted to finish college, get a good job, get married, have some kids, just kind of live that American dream, I guess. And I believed that I had that attitude that if I worked hard at whatever it was I was doing, that I could just about set any goal and then go out and achieve it. Spiritually, at this point in my life, I was kind of at a place where I think many of us find ourselves at times. I had been saved at a young age. I'd been baptized and went to church most of my life. But I was a little bit leery of giving God complete control of my life. I tell people that I wanted God in my life. I knew he was important to where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be. But I tell people it was more like I wanted God in the passenger seat alongside of me in case I needed help, got stuck in the mud or something, you know, and needed him to help me out. But I really didn't want to let him have complete and total control. I didn't want to let him drive, so to speak. And I knew that I needed to kind of make that change in life, and yet I just didn't do it. You go on the next picture there, please. This is a picture of Toronto Lake, where my family and I would go many times. I remember on July 14th of 1991, I was in church on a Sunday morning, sat in the back row. I'm not really sure what the preacher said that day, but it was one of those mornings where I knew that God wanted me to go up front at the end of the service and just give him the wheel, give him control of my life. And I walked out of church that day thinking there's going to be another Sunday. A couple of my friends were waiting on me to go out and get the boat, and we were headed out to this lake. And so I walked out of that church thinking there was going to be another Sunday, the last time I ever walked out of a church building. We went out to this lake, stayed the night, woke up the next morning. Perfect morning, man. I thank God for giving it to me. We went out and water skied, jet skied for a couple more hours before we went home. We knew we had a hay hauling job lined up for that afternoon. And so I drove the boat up to where we had camped and got into my pickup truck and hooked it onto the trailer. And I backed it down that little boat ramp that you see there. Got out of the truck, had a choice to make. Do I want to walk down that little gravel road that you see there that led back around to where our campsite was? Or do I want to run and dive off of that dock so I could swim over to where the boat was? And I was 19 years old, and you know how it is when you're 19, you're young, and you're a male. It doesn't take very much to make you think like you're, pretty hot stuff, pretty confident, invincible, feel like you're Superman. It's kind of how I felt that day. And so I ran and I dove off that dock without ever thinking of the consequences of what might happen. I just knew that whatever happened in life, I was going to be, young and strong, and I'd be able to handle it. My life changed in a matter of just a couple seconds. I was humbled. I dove off that boat dock. Normally it was about 5 feet deep enough to do a swimmer's dive. I didn't think to check. I didn't think about what the consequences might be. I just dove without thinking, hit my head on the bottom, twisted it down and around like that, completely shattered my fifth vertebra. My spinal cord was cut in two, and the next thing I know, I'm laying face down in about 3 feet of water, and I'm about ready to drown. I tried to move my arms, and I tried to move my legs, and nothing would happen. The messages I was sending from my brain to my body were not getting anywhere. I wasn't really sure at the time what had happened, but I knew something was desperately wrong, and if I didn't get help soon, then my life was going to be over. I began to think about my family and my friends. I began to realize I might not ever see them again. I began to think about all the hopes and dreams that I had, and begin to realize that they may get cut short. I began to think about where my friends were. I knew they were there with me that morning, but I didn't think they were watching me, and if they were, I wasn't sure if they could get there in time to roll me over. And finally, I began to think about God. I began to think I really probably didn't deserve to ask him for help, but I knew he was the only choice that I had. And so, as I sucked in lake water and tried to hold my breath and realized that my life was going to be over shortly if I didn't get help, I prayed and I said, God, I'm in a situation here where I can't do anything to save my own life. Will you help me? And it wasn't much longer after that I heard the water splashing around me. And one of my friends who was there, he came over and he rolled me over and he held me there in the water for about 45 minutes until the ambulance got there. One small choice, and my life changed drastically. I spent about the next 10 months in a hospital. We can go on to the next picture. And as you can see here, I'm on a ventilator. I've got a halo vest on. I can't talk. I can't breathe on my own. I can't eat. Can't drink. Can't move my head side to side. Some of my friends are reading birthday cards to me at my 20th birthday. It was one of the most depressing days of my life. I remember the doctor came into my room one day and he looked at me and he said point blank, he said, Kevin, we have done everything we can do to repair the bones around your spinal cord, but we cannot fix your spinal cord. It's been severed, and chances are you will never, ever be able to walk again. It's not the kind of news you want to hear when you're 19, 20 years old, or any age, I guess, for that matter. I will tell you that there were times when I felt like quitting, felt like giving up. I thought life wasn't worth living if I was going to have to live it that way. Times when I got so discouraged and so depressed that I began to question God. I began to wonder, did he really still love me? Did he really still have a plan for me? Was there a purpose for my life? I had a hard time many times seeing how anything good could ever come out of what was going on. And I began to ask God if he would maybe lessen the consequences a little bit and let me walk again. But for some reason, it didn't seem like God was answering any of my questions. He wouldn't tell me where we were going, what kind of plans he had. All I heard was a still small voice from somewhere within that just simply said, "Trust me. Don't give up. Trust me. Don't give up." And so I realized I had an important choice to make, one that was probably more important than the choice I made to dive off of the boat dock. It's made a powerful influence, a powerful difference in my life over the years. I made a choice to go ahead and say, "Okay, God, I'll trust you. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what you got in store for me, but I'm going to trust that you know what you're doing." We'll go on the next picture, please. Life eventually got a little bit better. In the hospital, they taught me how to drive a sip and puff wheelchair like I'm in today. If I blow hard in this straw, I go forward. I suck hard, I go backwards. I blow soft, I turn to the right. I suck soft, and I turn to the left. As I sit here, I can shrug my shoulders. I can feel my shoulders, my neck, and my head. But from there on down, I can't move or feel a thing. So at the hospital, they basically taught me how to use the wheelchair and a couple other devices, and then basically just taught my family and friends and people that were involved in my life just how to take care of me and try to make the best out of life. And I began to realize that I had to begin looking for other things that I could do in life. And as I got home, I began to realize that there weren't a lot of things I could do, and that my life was going to be very different for the rest of my life. And it was difficult for me to get to that point to where I really wanted to get out there and try to make the most of my life. But I felt as if God had a reason for me to be here. There was a reason He didn't allow me to die on that day. And so I began to look for things that I could do, ways that I could give back to my community for all the cards and support that they had shown to me. And I began to work with kids. I found out that kids were very interested in my wheelchair and very interested in me. And a lot of kids would come up to me and say, "Hey, what you got in the back? Got some Kool-Aid?" And that, I could just sit here and sip some Kool-Aid, a lot of them thought. We'll go on the next picture, please. So I began to tutor at a local grade school, and I began to work at an after-school program where we would teach kids Bible stories, teach them computers, help them with their homework. One of my jobs there was to teach them how to grow a vegetable garden. And so I began to do a lot of things that I never thought I would do. I tell people I used to want to go into accounting, but then I gave that up after the first year because I thought that would require too much sitting still. And now I'm like, hey, piece of cake, sitting still, I could do that all day. I should have stuck with that, I guess. But God used me to be an influence in the lives of a lot of children. In my hometown, I worked about 18 years at that after-school program, served as a youth pastor for about 4 years, and tutored at a local grade school. So God kept me pretty busy for quite some time. And during that time, I also learned how to make some websites. So I worked from home doing some websites for some businesses there, and also began to write down what it was that God had done in my life. And when I say write, I don't mean with a pen and a paper. I mean with a mouse stick, which I'll show you a picture of here in a little bit. Go on the next picture, please. This is a picture of my Uncle Wayne, Aunt Rose. Many of you may have seen them around town or around the church. We come down to visit them on occasion. Next picture, please. This is my wife, Jana. Last year, we borrowed your beach to get engaged. And go on the next picture, if you would. And we went home and got hitched. I tell people that most days I'm a little bit happier than what it looks there in that picture. Actually, a lot happier, I should say. But she's a blessing to me, and I wouldn't be able to go and to do what I'm doing today if it were not for her. So it's kind of a neat thing. We met way back in 8th grade, so it kind of took a long way around to making it to where we are today. But she's a total blessing. Next picture, please. This is a picture of how I type on a computer. Typed every letter of my book with that stick that you see in my mouth. Just one letter at a time. That stick has like a little pencil eraser type of an end on it, and I use that to punch the buttons on a keyboard. I also now have a voice-activated system that I do some work with as well. Next picture, please. And here's a picture of the front cover of my book. Learning to Live With It is a title, and there you see my website, kevinolson.net, at the bottom if you ever want to check that out. All right. Good for the pictures. Thank you very much. So, Learning to Live With It, the title of my book came from my 3-year-old brother at the time. About 2 years after I came home from the hospital, I was struggling with the doctor's prognosis that I would never walk again. I knew that God could perform miracles. I wanted God to heal me, to give me my life back. And I was struggling with the fact that God wasn't answering my prayers in the way that I wanted Him to, or in the time frame that I wanted Him to. And I was sitting outside watching James play in the sandbox. Just a nice 75, 80-degree day there in Kansas. And a bird flew by and dropped a big old pile of you-know-what right on my right shoulder. This is an unwanted circumstance, obviously, and I wanted it changed. How many of you have some unwanted circumstances in your life sometimes that you want changed? I hollered out to my little brother because I knew he liked to help me. I said, "Hey, James, let me come over here. I need your help." And he brushed a little sand off and waddled over there, and he stood next to me. I said, "You see that stuff on my shoulder?" He said, "Yeah, I see that." I said, "Will you wipe it off?" He said, "Okay." And he reached his little hand up there, and he was just about getting ready to wipe it off, and he froze. And he looked up at me with those big old 3-year-old eyes, and he said, "What is that?" And, I didn't want to lie to the kids, so I said, "Well, I just watched you play in the sandbox. Bird flew by, this fell out of the sky. Pretty sure it's bird poop." He wrinkled up his little nose and he jerked his hand back and he said, "Ooh." He said, "I'm not touching that." So I said, "Okay, go in the house and get Mom and ask Mom if she'll come out here." So he did, and Mom came out and she fixed the problem. But before he went in, he said something I'll never forget. And it was almost as if God used him to speak to my situation. He said, "Okay." He said, "I will go get Mom, but if she doesn't want to wipe it off of there, then you're just going to have to learn to live with it." And you know, as I begin to think about his words and my situation, I begin to think how many times God doesn't answer our prayers the way that we want Him to and in the time frame we want Him to. And He simply says to us that we need to learn to live with the unwanted, unchangeable circumstances in our lives. At first, that meant to me just to accept it. To say, okay, if this is how it's going to have to be, then that's fine, I can accept it. But then the words "live with it" also began to take on a second meaning to me. And that was to try to live my life in such a way that I could say that I was really living, or really making the most out of my life, despite the unwanted circumstances. So I began to look for things that I could do, and I began to try not to focus on all the things I couldn't do. Because I found that the more I focused on all the things I couldn't do, the more depressed I would become. So I began to work with kids, and I began to write, and I began to speak. And I remember one of the first times that I ever went to speak somewhere, A young lady came up to me afterwards and she said, she said, you don't have anything, yet you have everything. She said, I want what you have. And it became apparent to me that God had done a miracle on the inside of me, that he had given me a peace that was beyond all understanding, that he had given me a gift that I could share with other people. He had given me the ability to inspire and encourage and say to other people during the midst of their circumstances to trust and not to give up. One of the things that I found that's been so helpful to me in my life is to realize that God has given us each gifts and abilities, talents. To some, he gives small gifts. To others, he gives large gifts. But the thing that I've found is God will only ask you to give what you have. He won't ask you to give something that you don't have. I was taught this lesson by a little girl in my community one day when I was down at this local swimming pool. I was handing out Bible school flyers to the kids. And the kids would come up and talk to me and ask me all kinds of questions. And, I just found that my wheelchair was like a kid magnet. They just would come up to me and talk and talk and talk. And so it gave me a way to build relationships with them. And this one little girl came up to me, and her name was Alicia. And she talked for probably 30 minutes, and she wanted me to watch her go swim across the pool. So I watched her as she swam across the pool. Then I got busy talking to some other kids. And the next thing I know, here stands Alicia right beside me again. She was eating a Butterfinger. And she had this little smile on her face that you could tell she was up to something. And I happened to look down by my arm, and there was another Butterfinger laying right there beside my arm. She had slid it onto my armrest when I wasn't looking. And I said, "Is that for me?" She said, "Yeah, that's for you." I said, "Well, thank you." And I wanted to, reach down there and eat it, or I wanted to ask her if she'd feed it to me, but I wasn't sure if she was comfortable with that. So I didn't ask. But you could see the wheels spinning in her mind as she was looking like, why is he not eating that Butterfinger? And finally it clicked that I had told her I couldn't move my arms and couldn't move my hands. She said, "Would you like for me to unwrap that Butterfinger and feed it to you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'd love that." And so she fed me that Butterfinger that day. And through that little incident, she proved to me that giving what you have to give is not as important as what you have to give. You may be sitting out there today thinking you don't have a whole lot to give to other people. But I'm here to tell you, it doesn't take something big to make a big difference in the life of somebody. Little Alicia proved to me that day through a Butterfinger that as long as I just gave what I have to give, that I could make a big difference in the lives of people. And so I'm here today to tell you that I never wanted to be a speaker. When I got up in college to give my speech classes, speeches in my class, my knees would just knock together. I hated it. Didn't want to do it. I never wanted to be a writer. I told my high school English teacher that I would never be a writer. These are not the things that I wanted to give to other people in my life, but God took me down a different path. And even though I didn't understand it and I couldn't make sense of it, and I didn't get all the answers when I wanted them to, I've learned one thing, that through it all, my job is just simply to say, "Okay, God, I'm going to trust you. Here's the wheel. You drive. Wherever you want to take me, it's going to be okay." To sum up my message and kind of close today, I want to challenge you in whatever circumstances that you're facing in your life. If you're going through an unwanted, unchangeable circumstance and you're having trouble accepting it, learning to live with it, I want you to do that. I want you to just be able to just say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you, even though I don't understand. I want you to be able to realize that what you have to give is unique to you. And God has given you things, and He has not given you other things, and that's okay. Don't waste your time thinking about all the things God didn't give you or the things that you don't have. Use what you have right now. Do what you can with what you have right where you are. Because all God asks of you is just to simply give what you have to give. Trust Him. He has a plan and a purpose for you. He can work through all the circumstances of your life, whether they're good, whether they're bad. He is at work. You know, if you have some business you need to take care of with God today, maybe you need to lay some things over to Him and say, okay, God, I want to trust you with this, or I want to trust you with that. Maybe you need to accept Him as your Savior. Maybe you need to be baptized. Maybe you need to give Him the wheel of your life and say, okay, God, I want to give you control. I don't know what it is. I don't know where you are. But I just want to challenge you to think of this, that there's not always going to be another Sunday. I was fortunate to have many more Sundays. It's been 20-some years now, and I'm still going, and I'm thankful for that. But I've learned that life is a fragile gift. We're not promised tomorrow. And so today, as we give the invitation, as Walter comes and the musician comes, I want you to think about what's been said. Think about what God is doing in your life. And if He's tugging at your heart today, don't ignore Him. Walk this way before you walk out those doors. Walter, thank you much.
Thank you for joining us for this Real Life, Real Hope message brought to you by Anastasia Baptist Church. Today we heard an amazing testimony by Kevin Olson, a person who's lived with being a quadriplegic most of his life. Someone who's taken the unwanted circumstances in his life and let God use them for His glory. I just want to say that if you're dealing with unwanted circumstances in your life, God can use you, and God can use those circumstances to do great and amazing things. If you'd like support in any of these, I just encourage you to contact us. You can find Anastasia Baptist Church online. We're located at www.anastasiachurch.org. You can call us by telephone. Our area code is 904-471-2166, or you can come and visit us personally. We're located in the St. Augustine, Florida area. We're a spiritual lighthouse helping people to embrace the life-changing truth of Jesus Christ. We'd love to have you come and join us one weekend. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us for this message, and God bless you.